T is 2:15 in the afternoon and my day just ended. Just like that, over. I was on the second floor of Bloomingdale's, where the inexpensive shoes are, waiting for the elevator to take me and my son, whom I had roped into accompanying me by virtue of the fact that he is 5 months old and doesn't know the phrase "count me out" yet, to the fourth floor, where the expensive shoes are, so I could buy a pair of hot pink shoes because I needed them to go with my new dress with the hot pink trim. My mother used to say that pink is nice because it is the drug green. Green is pink. When the elevator doors finally opened, we could not get in because we had to wait for a man in a wheelchair to get out. It took a while. It seemed that he was blowing into a tube in order to operate the wheelchair. He was pretty well set up, all things considered, or rather, no things considered, if you know what I mean. He had a little rear-view mirror to look into and plenty of padded headgear to keep him steady as he looked, and some tubes, and then this breathing apparatus that appeared to tell the chair what to do, although when I told my husband about the chair, he said he didn't think there was that kind of technology, and I said I saw what I saw, and if it wasn't his breath that steered him around, then it was mental telepathy. But even if it was just a breathing tube, what is that? And there was some other mechanism I did not know of. What did it matter when he had some children's clothing piled on his wheelchair tray? Because that is when my day ended, when I saw that he was shopping for a child. I said goodbye to my day, and my son and I got in the elevator. Now, here's a question. Do we still go to 4 and look at pink shoes? The answer, of course, is yes. There is no point in having a dress with pink trim if you don't have any shoes to wear it with. Or rather, if you're lucky enough to have a dress with pink trim, it's okay to have the shoes too. It's okay to be lucky, I think. Yeah, maybe it depends on what your definition of luck is. You can't live everyone else's life. That would be terrible. You have to live your own. Everything is relative, or everything can't be relative. That's it, yes. Because either all of it is your fault or none of it is your fault. And it's not your fault. Well, maybe some of it is your fault. Angry, lucky, angry, lucky. You know what angry and lucky make together? Lungry. No, just kidding. Guilty. You could blow your brains out like this, or you could focus. You could just think about your own situation and do the best you can and try to be grateful and productive. You go all of your life wondering, will this or that ever happen? Will I be happy? Will I get married or have a baby? Or even a car? Will I ever play tennis again? You ask yourself these things when you are alone and struggling and kind of poor. And maybe you worry about the tennis more than the others because it is less scary. It is the benign host of everything you always assumed you'd eventually have and be. That is until the day you get out of graduate school and take a job as a waitress to support your acting career, neither of which supports you or your tennis habit. The future is completely up for grabs. You date actors who are notoriously both non-committal and broke, but they are sexy and they are there. It is a jovial but stunted culture, all that moving around and sleeping around and poverty. No one travels except for work. No one plays sports. No one has insurance. No one, including me, wants to do anything but act. There isn't room for the other things, extraneous things, frivolous, self-indulgent things, like marriage and children, and yet here I am with my incredible son. What a fatty he is. We spoke on that very subject just last night. I said, "What a fatty you are," and he said, "Ah, Roo and mint." And he stroked my cheek, and then he punched himself in the nose. We read, "Go, dog. Go." David and I started trying to get pregnant around the beginning of the 1998. I'd procrastinated. No, that's not it. What's another word? A word for being afraid you will disappear from the world as you know it when you have a baby, even though the truth is that no one will even know you've been gone. Wounded littered. something stupid and vain and meaningless. I assumed the first time we had unprotected sex I would get pregnant. I felt edgy and worried, like what if my big break, whatever that means at my age, nothing, comes and I am in the family way. Then, of course, my period arrived and I breathed a sigh of relief. When you are young, you are taught that the easiest thing in the world to get is pregnant. So for a while, it's the last thing you worry about. Or rather, you spend a lot of your 20s afraid that you are. It can happen at any time, even when you have your period. Even if you only did it once. You're a fertile field, a sea monkey, a packet of self-rising yeast. Just sprinkle with water and watch things grow. But you're not, really, and of all the things that finally fall into place when you grow up, this is one that sometimes does. The window of opportunity is really very small, you are informed, and getting smaller. Sometimes it takes years, or doesn't take at all. There are statistics you don't want to know. Suddenly the worst thing in the world that could ever happen to you becomes the worst thing that could ever not. The next thing I knew, 7 months had gone by, and every time I went into the bathroom and found blood, I sobbed. There goes another baby, I thought. You'd think women would get used to the blood, wouldn't you? And we sort of do, most of the time, although we never get over what a god-awful mess and pain in the ass it is. But on some occasions, for example, when the bleeding is not just inconvenient but metaphorical, when the blood flows from what feels like a wound, I am not pregnant and I am bleeding. It is a shock. All kinds of things would go through my head during this time. I am not getting pregnant because I used up all my luck landing someone as special as David for a husband. I am not getting pregnant because I made such a big deal about the whole thing before, or because I am still not ready. I am not getting pregnant because I am too busy helping to take care of my grandmother. She is my baby. I am not getting pregnant because that is just the way of the world. Some people do and some people don't. We went to a doctor, an infertility doctor. At first, I kept referring to him as the fertility doctor, until I realized it was infertility, as in, that's what he treats people for, but I preferred the other with its vague voodoo appeal. If he had wanted to dance around me singing sha 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 and sprinkling herbs, that would have been fine. Instead, he gave us a little pamphlet which he had designed to explain the course of our treatment. We would take all the easy, non-invasive diagnostic tests right away, in the hopes that our problem, that is, the one that wasn't caused by some kind of bad karma I had drummed up for myself, would have a non-invasive solution. Invasive being another relative concept, but I'll get to that later. The doctor gave me a routine pelvic exam, told us that he did not take insurance, and we were on our way. Our first official test was the postcoital test, where David's sperm was swabbed from my vagina the morning after and tested for signs of life, for PEP, for metal. The doctor showed them to me under a microscope, zipping around, frantic, directionless, wagging their tails, like college dropouts, aimless but expecting to make millions anyway. I thought them very beautiful, and I was proud. My children. Next came the quality of ovulation test, wherein my serial blood progesterone level was tested 7, 9, and 11 days after ovulation. Without sufficient progesterone, the uterine lining cannot nourish the egg. If it adheres at all, it will quickly slough off and die. That sounded very sad. People with this problem often miscarry over and over and do not even know it. They spot some time in the week or so after ovulation, and then they get their periods as usual, and it doesn't occur to them that anything is wrong. Sitting in the doctor's office, I racked my brain. Had I spotted? I actually wanted to have spotted. What I wanted most was to have a definitive reason for not getting pregnant. The best you can hope for is that the doctor says, "Eureka, I found it. I'll just fiddle with this and tinker with that." And you go home and take 3 of these and stand on your head reciting Ode to a Grecian Urn, and you'll be fine. There are many amazing remedies for infertility these days that didn't exist even 5 years ago. But you have to fit into one of the categories, or you could end up like space junk, untethered, floating off into the galaxy, a wasted miracle. But hey, I had a progesterone deficiency. I started using natural progesterone suppositories after each ovulation. That's as gross as it sounds. But I felt so proactive. And we didn't stop there, because infertility can be the result of a confluence of pathologies. So next we had the sperm antibody test. Evidently, it is possible for the sperm to reject the vaginal mucus or vice versa. Don't freak out here. If you want to have a baby, you have to say words like vaginal mucus out loud, or at least mutter them under your breath. Hooray, we win again. David's sperm was creating antibodies. By the time they had swum upstream, they had formed little protective helmets that might be keeping them from penetrating the egg. So next came the sperm penetration assay. Could the sperm penetrate the egg under optimum conditions? That is, without their helmets? Why, yes. Yes, they could. Okay. We responded to this news with monthly IUIs. Those are intrauterine inseminations. Sessions with a doctor and a high-tech turkey baster, which he used to place the sperm directly at my uterus, avoiding my pestilent fluids. David would masturbate in the morning and drop off the sperm at the doctor's office on his way to work. I would show up about an hour later, and after confirming that the sperm the doctor was offering was indeed David's, I would accept it from the doctor like a communion cracker, sort of. But we kept having sex, too. Because as the doctor said, who knows? The 5th test on our doctor's prospectus was the hysterosalpingogram, or if you were feeling zippy, the hysterogram for short. I was warned that some found this procedure painful and it would be a good idea to take Advil or Motrin before and after it was performed. What I was not warned was that this procedure was excruciating. A doctor, not my doctor, but one he'd recommended, flooded my uterus with a dye solution and then x-rayed my entire reproductive tract looking for blockages. He suggested it might feel like slightly more intense menstrual cramps. Nice try. I knew what intense menstrual cramps felt like, and this wasn't it. This felt like someone was ripping my insides out with a pair of needle-nose pliers. And on top of it, the unavoidable sexual aspect of it. Not sexual as in sexy, but sexual as in involving my sex organs, was profoundly disturbing. It may be the most I have ever felt invaded. I sobbed hysterically through the entire thing. David could hear me in the waiting room and asked if he could come in, and they told him no. Most people probably don't know this, and don't need to know this, but the Greek root of hysteric means suffering in the womb. There's a point when you are starting to think about having children that you begin to notice other people's, and you say to each other, "I want one of those," and you get excited, and then, oddly, the longer you try, the more children you notice. In fact, everyone on the street is pushing a stroller, and the ratio of pregnant women to non-pregnant women in your neighborhood is at least 3 to 1. Everyone has a baby but you. Everyone can have a baby but you. All the other things your life is about aren't what it is about anymore. They all go away. What were all the things I used to do? I was in a lot of plays. I was in some independent movies, but then everyone in the world has been in some independent movies. I still hadn't gotten on Law and Order. I wrote some stuff, a script, some essays, and some stories that I performed around. I went places with my husband. We went to movies and met up with friends and played tennis and went on ski vacations together. He's a terrific guy, of course, but he's no baby. Everyone says that the best way to get pregnant is just to get on with your life and not worry about it. and that's what I tried to do, on the outside. But on the inside, I did nothing and went nowhere. On the inside, I was sick at the thought that I might not be able to have a child. I finally had a husband and security and work that I cared about, all the things I'd always considered the prerequisites of motherhood, and I was less wound-angled and hublettered than I'd ever been. It never occurred to me in a million years that anything I was doing in my life was about becoming a mother, but in retrospect, all roads led here. They would, I presumed, lead away again at some point, or who knows, maybe not. But I kept coming back to the idea of luck. I just wasn't lucky. Other people were lucky. Why were other people lucky? And to me, being unlucky wasn't just a manifestation of unseen forces in the universe. It was a personal flaw. Luck was something I somehow failed to have, which by definition is contradictory, but it's so like me to seek blame and yet refuse it at the same time. Every month I would take a blood test 10 days after my presumed ovulation. A blood test could determine pregnancy several days earlier and with greater accuracy than a urine test, and the doctor wanted as much time as possible to prevent an early miscarriage. So one morning each month I would give blood at a lab on 86th and Park, and then the doctor's assistant would call in the afternoon with the results. In order to prevent any miscommunication, her greeting was this: "Hi, it's Suzanne. I'm sorry, sweetheart." That was it. Every month. And then, after a few bloody, disconsolate days, she'd call with the next month's instructions, and we'd start again. I had a choice. I could take a trial of fertility drugs, or I could have the laser laparoscopy and hysteroscopy. The latter were surgical procedures to find and repair endometriosis and/or, if possible, address any blockage not revealed by the dread hysterogram. I had neither the symptoms nor a history of endometriosis, so my doctor recommended the drugs. I panicked. Even the lowest dose of Clomid, my doctor's drug of choice, carried a 6 to 8% chance of twins. What a fertility drug does, if you are not ovulating, is to make you ovulate. You were already ovulating, and I was. It induces the release of an extra egg or two, thereby upping the chances for fertilization. Yikes. Still, praying to the forces of good, or whatever, for one baby but not for two, definitely did not seem right. I agreed to take the drugs. I was freaked out by the Clomid. It made me feel very on edge, and I was already on edge. I was on the edge of the edge. I spoke in terse 1 or 2 word sentences. My head ached. Keep your eyes on the prize, I told myself. Or prizes. 4 eggs came down the chute. 1 was definitely mature. 1 might mature in time for ovulation, and 2 were teeny-weeny specks. Useless, wasted things. That's the way with the drug. To help the front runners, I was given a shot of HCG, or human chorionic gonadotropin, in the ass. HCG, a naturally produced hormone, triggers ovulation within a certain window of time, so everyone, the eggs, the sperm, and I, can all get to the theater for curtain, so to speak. We also did 2 IUIs about 24 hours apart. David came home at lunch, and we looked at a copy of Jugs together. Afterward, I started again with the progesterone suppositories. Nada. When my period finished, I took another round of Clomid, this time with no misgivings. Bring on the babies. The more the merrier. It had been a year since we started trying to conceive. That probably doesn't seem like long to some people, but since I have a self-destructive habit of calculating my life in dog years, it was an eternity to me. We had all but worked our way through the doctor's little pamphlet. He didn't even list in vitro fertilization as an option, because everyone knows it's the last one, the last-ditch effort. I did not want to end up there, at the end of the line, with nothing else to try. At the same time, the doctor had yet to prove that conception was impossible using plain old sex. David and I could still keep trying after all the extraordinary measures had been exhausted. We would be like the inhabitants of Gilligan's Island. We would stand on the beach and shout at ships on the horizon until kingdom come or we were cancelled. Our doctor was a very fine doctor. We'd heard stories of couples he had helped who had been told by other infertility specialists to adopt. Perhaps he was like the doctor in Orange County who was caught impregnating his patients with his own super sperm. I tried not to care. The man was reasonable looking, and certainly he was very smart. He was a doctor. The only thing I didn't like about him was that he talked too much. He chatted through every procedure, including the inseminations, most likely with the intention of keeping me relaxed. It had the opposite effect. He and his nurse would quiz me about current Broadway shows while he doused my uterus with David's sperm. I don't like it when David says anything other than, "Oh, Cindy." Why would I want to talk theater? But I couldn't find a graceful way to ask them to respect the sanctity of the moment. It seemed ungrateful. So I brought in my Walkman. I put my headphones on and closed my eyes, and I guess they got the message because all I could hear was the boss. I went into myself, into my body, fantastic voyage-like. I swam north with the sperm, single-minded. We were heading upstream to spawn. The doctor had actually praised this particular batch, so we were pretty pumped. We would save the species from extinction or die trying. We courted the hell out of those eggs. We took them out to dinner and held hands with them under the table. We walked 25 blocks in the snow and talked as if we'd known each other forever. We bought them flowers at the all-night deli and then slow danced to Jungle Land. We ate Haagen-Dazs from the carton, watching Dana Andrews obsess over Gene Tierney and Laura on the Late Late Show. Then we made our move. Once again, I went for my blood test, and once again, I spent the afternoon in stone-cold dread of the inevitable phone call from Suzanne. Things had gotten to the point where I could not imagine any answer other than no. I'd stopped envisioning my body as being capable of anything at all, much less conception. Nothing ever happens the way you think it will. When David proposed to me, I had to ask him to repeat himself because I hadn't been listening. I had been thinking about my grandmother Lil, who had just died, and my father, who had just had a heart attack. The whole thing, the romantic restaurant, the roses, the funny, crappy $14 ring from Weber's Closeout, all smooshed by in a blur. Most people I know are capable of giving highly detailed, minute-by-minute accounts of the defining moments of their lives. And I'm always like, "What did you say?" That is how I felt about trying to become pregnant. Like the moment of truth had somehow come and gone without my quite knowing what had happened. It was supposed to be so easy, like on TV. Remember when we made Susie, Justin, Brittany, Mac? That's my deepest flaw. I don't know how, but I just knew. I'd laid there with a pillow under my butt and my legs in the air, and I knew nothing. I'd taken my temperature and put my fingers inside myself to gauge the quality of my vaginal mucus. Stretchy like egg whites equals fertile. Tacky like old jam equals infertile. I'd performed countless at-home ovulation tests, and I'd gulped Robitussin, because I'd heard of women getting pregnant during bouts of cold and flu, and that they credited the mucus-thinning agent in cough medicine. I'd gone to the best doctor I could find and done everything he told me to do. I'd wished on eyelashes, on chicken bones, on candles, on stars, and still, I knew nothing. And I'd come to the conclusion that those home pregnancy kits were a joke, a marketing scheme. They would never turn the other color or show 2 lines or 3 dots or a smiley face. So I waited, and finally Suzanne called. She started talking about how I'd brought my Walkman in and something else, but I didn't hear her because I was listening for the word sorry. "Well, it must have been the Walkman," she said. "Where was sorry? Come on, sorry. What?" I said. It must have been the Walkman. What? It must have done the trick. Because you're pregnant. I just kept saying, what did you say? Like I always do. And she repeated the whole thing again, and I cried loudly and said, "Oh my God," 30 times. "Call your husband," she said. I did. I called David and cried, "We did it." That was the best I could do. I knew I was supposed to show up at his office with a bottle of champagne or FedEx him knit booties or casually refer to him as Daddy-O over a candlelit dinner. But I had no self-control. I was utterly incredulous, as if a dinner plate had spoken to me in French. Dumb luck. That's all it was, or, who knows, grace. Divine leniency. This morning when my son saw me, his face did this. "Is that you?" It is you. Oh, hooray, hooray, hooray. And now, here we are riding up and down the elevator in Bloomingdale's looking for pink shoes.